Welcome to Jay Coletti's Racket Reviews. My name is Jay Coletti, and I will be your hostess. Here on Racket Reviews, we are dedicated to learning about all things organized crime, and today I'm really looking forward to continuing our discussion about the New Orleans Mafia. In the past few weeks, we've mostly covered mafia group versus mafia group, but this week we're going to be discussing organized crime versus the law and the media. It's very exciting stuff. If you're enjoying the channel and would like to become a Racket Reviews patron, please head on over to the Patreon account and join the Coletti family. Now, without further ado, we have much to discuss, so let's get right to it. As a brief recap from our last episode, the Joseph Macheca and Salvatore Matranga coalition had been successfully ruling the New Orleans underworld since the deaths of the Agnello brothers and their Palermitani crew. One of the Agnello underlings, Matteo Menafo, would cause trouble for a short time following their deaths, but he would die soon after of natural causes as well. After Menafo's death, the Macheca-Matranga coalition, or the Stupaglieri as they were widely known, was once again in the driver's seat. That was until another Palermo Sicilian put up a resistance, and that was Giuseppe Esposito. Esposito was an organized crime member from the Old Country and would move to the United States to avoid a murder charge back home, only to find himself tangled up again in organized crime across the Atlantic Ocean. Esposito's ranking in the Sicilian Mafia was debated by historians for years, many considering him more of a thug or a bandit. The FBI would later maintain that Esposito was actually the first known Sicilian Mafia member to immigrate to the United States. Esposito would team up with a wealthy family that would control the docks through unions. Joseph Provenzano and his family had been previous associates of Joseph Macheca, the wealthy merchant who provided financial backing to the Matranga crew. Provenzano would team up with Esposito to form their own coalition to fight against the reigning Macheca-Matranga crew. In fact, by 1881, the Esposito-Provenzano coalition, also known as the Giardinieri, would be the most powerful organized crime group in New Orleans. Unfortunately for the Giardinieri, Esposito would be arrested by the New Orleans detectives and cousins Mike and David Hennessy. Esposito would be sent to New York City immediately for a deportation trial. Shortly thereafter, he was found guilty and handed over to the Italian authorities for his crimes back in Sicily. Esposito left behind a weakened Provenzano family that would soon fade from power. He would also leave New Orleans organized crime rings split between the rival Stupaglieri and Giardinieri crews, a split that actually mimicked the Sicilian rivalry back home. Esposito's arrest and deportation would also make Mike and David Hennessy national heroes and media darlings. As a quick aside, the word Stupaglieri means stoppers in English, and the Giardinieri means gardeners. In any case, the Stupaglieri side was run by the Macheca-Matranga crew, with the Matranga portion now controlled by Salvatore Matranga's son, Carlo or Charles Matranga, and the Giardinieri was controlled by the fatally wounded but still powerful Provenzano family. Alright, now that you're all caught up, let's move on to the next part of our story. The year is 1881. Charles Matranga and Joseph Macheca were now in conflict with the Giardinieri run by Joseph Provenzano and his mafia crew. Macheca and Matranga were able to further legitimize themselves by using Macheca's business associate Antonio Locascio to build the Matranga-Locascio firm to attack the Provenzanos legislatively. New Orleans Police Chief David Hennessy, oh yeah, you'd best believe that he got a promotion after that Esposito case, had brokered a weak peace agreement between the Matrangas and the Provenzanos. The Matranga-Locascio firm's primary purpose was to wriggle control of New Orleans docks from the hands of the Fruit Laborers Union owned by the Provenzano family. By 1888, the Matranga-Locascio firm would include at least the following: Charles Matranga, Antonio Locascio, James Caruso, Vincent Caruso, and Rocco Geraci. In the early 1880s, however, the Caruso family seemed to have a stronger association with the Fruit Laborers Union and the Provenzanos, who, once again at that time, basically owned the New Orleans docks. The Fruit Laborers Union also included Provenzano associates Victor Pellegrini, who served as the Union Grand Marshal, and Frank DeMar, a Provenzano brother-in-law. Why am I mentioning all of these names to you? Well, I'll give you a hint, it's not for no reason. By 1885, the Matranga-Locascio firm had succeeded in getting control out of the hands of the Provenzanos' Fruit Laborers Union. According to a local newspaper, this was due to the firm's, quote, quick work and careful handling of fruit, but we all know that this victory came by way of political maneuver and trading favors. The Provenzano family did not take this takeover lying down, though. This legislative battle went on for about 4 years before the firm had accomplished their goal, and in about 4 more years, things started to get bloody. But you knew things were going to get bloody, didn't you? On January 5th, 1888, a 28-year-old man by the name of Antonio Bonora was shot at close range and would die of his injuries before the ambulance had time to arrive. When asked by authorities about who had shot him, Bonora gave no name. He only asked for his mother and her blessing. Later, authorities would discover that Bonora had been a member of the Fruit Laborers Union and the Tiro al Bersaglio, literally meaning target shooting. This was an Italian special interest group that specialized in, you guessed it, target shooting. Another important member of this group was Joseph Macheca. That's right, Bonora was associated with both Macheca and Provenzano, but that's not where the crossover stops. Bonora had been drinking at the saloon earlier that night with Vincent Pellegrini, Frank DeMar, and Sam Caruso, 2 Provenzano men and a Provenzano turncoat and member of the Matranga Locascio firm. Pellegrini, DeMar, and Caruso would all be questioned by authorities about the murder, but none of them really provided any useful information. Just wait, this plot thickens even further. Bonora's murder technically remains unsolved, but the primary suspect was actually Rocco Geraci, one of the Matranga Stupaghieri. Was this coordinated by Macheca and Caruso through Matranga? Had Caruso been working with the Matranga Locascio firm all along? Who called for Geraci to pull the trigger, and was he really even the killer? All of these questions we probably will never get the answer to, but just as you and I have this feeling, the media and the authorities had the sense that this had something to do with organized crime. Despite their suspicions, no one ever really got answers. However, this murder would be the first of many in the gang war directly following the killing. The Provenzanos weren't going down without a fight, and the Macheca Matranga crew already had plenty of practice when it came to getting their hands dirty. Late one night, 6 of the Matranga associates, Antonino, or Tony Matranga, Charles Matranga's brother, Bastiano Incardona, Anthony Locascio, Rocco Geraci, Salvatore Sanseri, and Vincent Caruso were all carpooling, or I suppose horse-drawn wagon pooling, home from a long night at the docks. It was around 1 a.m. on May 6, 1890. When the wagon came to an intersection, gunfire began ringing out from the nearby tree line. Several Provenzano men had been lying in wait. Matranga was shot in the knee. This would later result in the amputation of his leg. Caruso was struck twice in his right leg, once in the thigh and once in the calf, resulting in permanent nerve damage on his foot, and Sanseri was shot through the hip. Matranga's men drew weapons in defense, but the volley of gunfire ended when the Provenzano men ran out of sight toward the river. The police arrived on the scene soon after, and once it was understood that the Provenzanos and the Matrangas had thrown his peace deal into the trash can, Police Chief David Hennessy personally took up the case, issuing the arrest of several Provenzano members. Not to spoil the surprise, but Hennessy's decision to get directly involved with this conflict and the subsequent trial would mark the beginning of the end for him. On October 15, 1890, just about 5 months after the Matranga shooting and innumerable death threats from the New Orleans Mafia families, Police Chief Hennessy attended a police meeting that ended around 9 p.m. After the meeting, Hennessy and Captain William O'Connor of a private protection agency hired to protect Hennessy headed to the Hennessy home. It had been raining earlier, which caused quite a bit of flooding on Hennessy's normal route, so the 2 men took their time, even deciding to stop for a quick plate of oysters on the corner of Poydras Street. This does not matter, but it's an assault to my senses and I'm going to share it with you. Hennessy was what was referred to as a teetotaler, meaning he never drank alcohol. Since this was before the Coca-Cola Company was founded on January 29, 1892, Hennessy did not have a lot of options to pair with his oysters. And since Hennessy was not interested in a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, my personal recommendation is a pairing for oysters. One would think that a glass of water might be the best option. Maybe some Louisiana sweet tea if you were really hankering for something to break up the taste. No, Hennessy thought that the best option to go with his oysters was milk. Milk with seafood, it's disgusting. Anyway, after Hennessy's nauseating late-night snack, he and Captain O'Connor continued onward to Hennessy's home. Although O'Connor was assigned to see Hennessy all the way back to his house, O'Connor and Hennessy parted ways early. I'm a little suspicious of this decision, given what happened next. Once O'Connor was about a block away, Hennessy would receive several gunshot wounds. A young boy, later identified as Esperi Marchesi, would cross in front of Hennessy, then let out a long whistle as if to signal the attack. Shots began firing, first wounding Hennessy's left hand. He pulled his revolver with his right hand before receiving a shotgun wound to his right knee, shattering it. He then was shot in the chest, stomach, face, and neck before he was able to lift his revolver and fire blindly into the shadows. 2 men, covered by darkness, would be very lightly illuminated by the streetlights before firing another shot into Hennessy's body and running off. When O'Connor finally managed to get back to Hennessy, who had desperately been dragging himself toward his home, Hennessy collapsed, saying, "They gave it to me, and I gave it back the best I could." When O'Connor asked if he recognized the attackers, Hennessy replied simply, "They goes." This would be the first of many racist things that occurred after Hennessy's death, but I just hate the idea that a man's last word on this earth was a racial slur. It seems that the primary motivation for Hennessy's killing was not only his decision to be so directly involved with this trial, but it seemed that he had also come upon information that linked several of Macheca's men to crimes back in Sicily. He had been trying to correspond with the chief of police in Rome to get more answers. He never got the chance. The murder of Chief Hennessy was a huge story. The people of New Orleans were outraged, and this led to an arrest and trial of 9 Macheca Matranga men, including Joseph Macheca and Charles Matranga themselves. The indictment had charges listed against 19 men, but only 9 of them went to trial. Another interesting character of the 9 men on trial was Manuel Polizzi. He was quickly identified as one of the gunmen in the shooting when the trial commenced on February 28, 1891. Polizzi made quite a show of himself, passionately standing up and making speeches in Italian that no one on either legal side could understand. The judge then asked Charles Matranga to interpret for Polizzi, but after a brief conversation, Matranga told the judge, quote, "He don't want to talk to me." The judge would then ask Macheca to interpret, but this once again was met with refusal. Soon it became evident, especially after they finally got an interpreter, the defense team dropped Polizzi, and Polizzi insisted that he be housed separate from the other men, that Polizzi was going to rat out the rest of them. He even had a conversation with the judge that remained classified. Later we found out that he claimed to be completely innocent, but had all of the information about how $4,000 had been divided with the express direction to murder Hennessy. Because of several obvious lies and gaps in logic, Polizzi's testimony was not very convincing. Polizzi would later have a full mental breakdown in the courtroom and attempt to throw himself out a closed window before being sent back to the Orleans Parish prison, where all of the men who were being questioned had been held. While Polizzi was making quite a show of himself, there was one testimony that was obviously lacking, and that was Captain O'Connor. He was never called to testify. The lack of testimony from O'Connor, Polizzi's crazy antics, and the typical tight-lipped behavior from the rest of the Sicilian Americans led to a jury on March 13, 1891 that failed to reach an agreement on Polizzi and 2 other accused gunmen, while finding the rest of the men not guilty. The prosecutors had quite powerfully accused the defendants of jury tampering, and this narrative consumed the New Orleans public. On a normal basis, this might have resulted in a retrial, but that was not in the cards this time. The defendants and co-conspirators would be held overnight in the Orleans Parish prison and were to be released the next day. However, after no conviction verdict came back for a single member of the obviously mob-associated men who were believed to be responsible for the death of a beloved police chief, the citizens of New Orleans were irate, and the local city leaders only fanned the flames. On March 14, 1891, these leaders called a morning gathering of the angry mob outside the prison. The mob, carrying guns and grudges, broke into the Orleans Parish prison to take matters into their own hands, namely by way of a lynch mob. 11 Sicilian Americans were killed in this New Orleans lynching. 5 of them had nothing to do with the controversial case. These deaths included Manuel Polizzi, Rocco Geraci, and Joseph Macheca. The men were shot and hanged after having received a not guilty verdict, an acquittal by the legal system, or having had nothing to do with the case at all. An interesting but tragic fact about this lynching is that the 1891 New Orleans lynching is the largest lynching in the history of the United States. On May 5, 1891, after this lynching had been examined by a grand jury, not only did the members of the lynch mob avoid indictment, but their actions were justified. The grand jury explained as follows, quote, "It is shown in the evidence that the gathering on Saturday morning, March 14th, embraced several thousands of the first, best, and even the most law-abiding of the citizens of this city, assembled, as is the right of American citizens, to discuss in public meeting questions of grave import. We find a general sentiment among these witnesses, and in our intercourse with the people, that the verdict as rendered by the jury was contrary to the law and evidence, and secured mainly through the designing and unscrupulous agents employed for the special purpose of defeating the ends of justice. At that meeting, the determination was shown that the people would not submit to the surrender of their rights into the hands of midnight assassins and their powerful allies. This narrative would not be corrected officially until 2019. On April 12, 2019, New Orleans Mayor Latoya Cantrell would issue an official proclamation of apology. Back in 1891, Charles Matranga and his top lieutenant Sylvester Carollo not only survived this lynching, but would emerge unscathed and more powerful than ever. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Racket Reviews, wrapping up the Mustache Pete era of organized crime in New Orleans. Moving forward, now that Matranga is in control and Carollo is in the passenger seat, we're going to see the New Orleans Mafia grow in the Prohibition Era and, of course, the subsequent Golden Era, which I know many of you are very excited to learn more about. Make sure to let me know in the comment section below or on Facebook and Twitter what you think about the New Orleans Mafia. Also, don't forget to utilize that comment section in social media to let me know who or what you would like to see covered next. I always love hearing from you, and I'm always happy to investigate. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click notifications to get more Mafia content sent directly to your sub box. Ciao!